WoW Dragonflight patch 10.2.5 Seeds of Renewal just released, and with it, we got a new feature, Follower Dungeons, where you can take AI NPCs into dungeons instead of real players. This is a new feature very similar to Final Fantasy's Trust Dungeons. And on paper, these dungeons are a great thing. You can jump in instantly, solo, without waiting for tanks and healers. You can go in and practice your role or your spec without worrying about letting other people down. You can go at your own pace, and you can explore and get more of the lore from the dungeon at a slower pace without worrying about being rushed through at a meta min-max route. So in this video, I want to go over the new WoW follower dungeons, the good, the bad, and if this is a good addition to the game, or if it's just a cheap copy-paste of Final Fantasy XIV. So let's get into this and see how it works. So when you would normally queue up for a dungeon, you now have the option for follower dungeons. You can queue in completely solo if you want to go in instantly with a full team of AI. And this is only for basic dungeons. So think the story. While you're going through the story and you have to complete the story dungeons as part of the main story, you can do these now with AI, or you can go back at max level and do them for gear. So this is only for, catching up alts or the very early start of endgame, the very, very, very early start of getting that base gear. You won't be running Mythic Plus with these guys. I think that would be a cool feature to, run the low-level Mythic Pluses like 2 to 5, where you can start getting on the gear track, and you don't have to worry so much about getting rejected because you've not got any Keystone score, when you can't get a Keystone score because you can't get into a Mythic Plus. So I think if they did run this to 2.5, it would be a great way to give new players and, alts a way to learn those new Mythic Plus dungeons and learn the basic mechanics, the route, that kind of thing. And as someone who doesn't play tank, I've always found routes intimidating. So it would be great to go in as a tank on Mythic Plus and just practice it. So yeah, I do hope they develop this out, but for now, it's just normal, but there is definitely a lot of potential here. So when you first go in, let's talk about the followers. You aren't running this with Anduin or Thrall on your team. You're running it with people like Meredy Huntswell, Shuja Grimax, Captain Garrick. Now, you might remember these as the NPCs from Exile's Reach, the tutorial area, but you'd be forgiven for not remembering them because these are not memorable characters. You don't really get much banter or much dialogue, and there's not much hype seeing, Meredy Huntswell in the dungeon. It doesn't bring me any excitement, but that's just me. I would say this is done incredibly well in Final Fantasy XIV, and they should just take it. In that game, you choose which NPCs you want to take in the dungeon and which role you want them to fill. And they're all the main characters from the story. So when you go into a story dungeon, you get that additional dialogue and lore from your favorite characters. So if you're playing through the story and there's some huge events and you're doing like a big 3-hour piece of the story, you can then go in that dungeon with the characters that you discovered the dungeon with. And it would be the same in Dragonflight as if we could take the dragon aspects in the dungeon with us. That would add a lot of lore to the dungeon that are about the dragon aspects or are about the characters we're traveling around the Dragon Isles with. So I think that's a bit of a missed opportunity, and I do think they should capitalize on that because it's amazing in Final Fantasy XIV, and it's one of the main selling points of the Trust Dungeons. People love it so much that instead of it just came out for the most recent expansion, and they put it back. They reworked it into all the old dungeons for all the old expansions. It was a big hit over there, and I think it would be over here if they did it as well. Next thing I want to talk about is the AI. Now, when we think of the AI, this is what kind of makes or breaks these dungeons. Are they static robots, or do they actually feel like real players? And they've done an amazing job. I think they've ticked all the boxes. The AI do incredibly well. It feels authentic, it feels real, and they have a lot of character to them. Some of the cool stuff here is, as you're running through, they'll do little random jumps like a player does. They mount up between big packs, which is really awesome because, when you're doing like Mythic Plus, you'll mount up in certain areas to make time. Which I wasn't expecting that side of stuff, but it's really good. They seem to have like targeted routes as well, so they'll go round certain packs and like they'll have a planned route that is pretty good. It's like more strategic than just running it straight down the middle, which is kind of what I expected from these dungeons. So yeah, that's really good. On top of this, they've got some like cute little things like the healers will cast dispels and they'll bloodlust on bosses. They lay out like refreshments at the start of the dungeon if you've got the right character with you in the dungeon. So there's a lot of cool stuff here, and they actually make you feel like you're running a dungeon with real people. People don't even talk in normal WoW dungeons like the normal mode. So if you showed me a AI dungeon and a normal player dungeon, they would probably look pretty similar. The only downside I'd say is when you let the AI lead. So you can lead yourself or you can let them lead where the tank will go ahead of you. And they're very, very slow. They stop after every single pack and just kind of stall. They'll heal up. They'll kind of just like re-pull every single thing slowly. And I found it easier just to take control and pull the packs myself and then let the tank run in and get aggro after. It's much, much faster. Overall, I was clearing these dungeons in around 10 minutes, which is pretty good. This is from the perspective of a fairly well-geared character. When your gear is lacking, it is a little bit slower. But yeah, even with good gear, the tank manages to hold aggro, the healer manages to keep everyone alive. You can kind of just turn your brain off here and just enjoy the ride. It's quite nice, it's quite relaxing, and you get loot. So let's talk about the loot. You can loot every single boss, and at level 70, the dungeons drop at eye level 421, which is 3 out of 8 explorer gear. I ran 2 of these dungeons back to back, and I got 1 piece of loot from each dungeon. I don't know if that's RNG, I don't know if that's random, I don't know if it's split between the different NPCs or how it works, but yeah, I got 1 piece from each dungeon, and then at the end, I got 15 flight stones from the final boss in both of the dungeons I ran. Again, that's just the 2 I did. Maybe you're going to get 3 pieces, maybe you're going to get no pieces, I'm not sure, but yeah, that you do get loot from these, and you can loot every boss. So yeah, overall, I think these follower dungeons are a great addition to the game, but they don't add as much as they could. I think there's some things here they could develop on, but the foundations of this is really, really good. Whereas in Final Fantasy XIV, the story is the main part of the game, and the characters are beloved by the fans of the game. So if you play through this multi-expansion solo story, being able to jump into the dungeons with these same characters is very immersive, and it's a feature that the community love. In WoW, I know that we're not as connected to the story. If you haven't played the old expansions, you probably don't even follow the old story. But Dragonflight did a good job of telling a decent story, and I think integrating those characters into the dungeons would have worked really well. Seeing as this came out so late in the expansion, I do hope in the War Within, if we take the follower dungeons with us and it carries on, I really hope they just leech from Final Fantasy how they did theirs. Because if you had some big event in the story of the War Within, and you said, oh, now we need to go in this dungeon. If you could then go, okay, Anduin, I want you to come in as a tank. And then you look like, oh, I need some DPS. Okay, let's take Khadgar, so we have a Bloodlust. Things like that would work so well, and it's such an easy thing they could. It's an easy win, and it would make these pop a lot more than they maybe do now. The big win here, the big strength here is the AI. They've done an incredible job with the AI. It feels authentic, it feels realistic, and it actually has quite a lot of character, more than I was expecting. This is a great place to learn your build, learn your class, learn your spec. If you level as, say, a Retribution Paladin all the way to max level, and then you go, I actually want to be a tank at endgame, or you play as you play some Mythic Plus, and then you go, I want to switch to tanking. You can jump into these dungeons and you have a healer that needs to regain mana at the end of fights. You have DPS that you need to pull aggro off. You have things that you need to do, that you have spells that you need to interrupt. So you can build out your hotbar, you can play the game properly, and you can really learn your role without just going into, say, a heroic or a normal dungeon with 4 other players and fumbling and having that embarrassment of, oh, I actually don't have any of these buttons bound, or I actually don't know what to do if we get if someone takes aggro from me. So yeah, I think this is going to be an amazing place to learn, a good place to get basic gear, but it just needs that heart of being a part of the story, which I think would make it a 10 out of 10. But yeah, overall, I think this is a fantastic addition. It's a really good first step. You know, the first integration of the follower dungeon is surprisingly good, and it is a good foundation to build upon. And if they do build upon it, I think it will be loved as much in this as Final Fantasy XIV. But that's it for me. Love it, hate it, let me know in the comments. Maybe you just think it's meh, you're not even going to try it, you don't even care. Let me know as well, I'm curious, because I think it's great. But that's it for this video. Take care, and I'll catch you in the next one.